these corporations are raking in 30, $40 billion a year. And I think the
Yeah.
workers are asking simply, can
Yeah.
I make enough to just be able to put food on the table? Unemployment rate is pretty low, but yet all of us know every single day when we're in our community, the struggle that our people are
Yeah.
experiencing. Why are
Yeah.
people working every day and still yet not able to put food on the table or worse,
That's right.
a roof over their head?
You're listening to the Blueprint for California Advocates podcast. My name is Christina Voss Hamilton. I'm your host. I'm also the founder of KPH Advocacy, a lobbying and political consulting firm based in Sacramento, California. If you're an advocate in the work for justice, equity, sustainability, you're in the right spot. In each episode, I bring on special guests who share their insight and tactical advice on what it really takes for your political and legislative campaigns to succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave a review on your podcast player and also share the episode with your network so we can spread the word and share this important information with as many advocates as we can. Now let's get into it. I'm so happy today to be joined by Tia Orr, the Executive Director of SEIU State Council, Service Employees International Union. Tia and I have lobbied in the trenches for many years, and I'm so happy to be talking to her today as my guest. Tia, if it's okay, we will start with just having you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background on how you landed in the position you're in today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, we have fought many battles in the trenches together. And so I imagine we still have more battles to come. And I have a tremendous
Right.
amount of respect for you and the work that we've been able to get done. So thank you. And thank you to your listeners
Thank
for
you.
joining today. I'm Tia Orr, as you said, Executive Director of SEIU California. I've been with SEIU, God, for about 17 years now. I started off as a lobbyist. I came from Mervyn Dimley's office. Mervyn Dimley was a longtime legislator, a legend, I would call him, who had many different roles in his civil service work. And his last role here in Sacramento as an assembly member, I had the pleasure of working in his office. And then after that, was able to transition over to SEIU and take on the battles of workers and the movement. I've had a pleasure working in and a lot of battles, like I said, with you, taking on corporate power and making sure that we fight for workers and we fight for those who are most vulnerable. Look, I will say that, when I first started, I didn't have any idea that I was going to go into the labor space. It wasn't something that was on like my radar. But soon after you get involved in policy in the legislature, you realize where the movement is built at and where people are pushing back at. And it was something that inspired me. And I'm happy to be here.
So we are here to talk about this concept of corporate power and the role that unions play as a challenge to that. I would love to start with the recent news that two very important bills, probably two of the most important bills that passed in 2022, the Secretary of State announced that the opponents of the bills had collected enough signatures to put the bills on hold, and now they will basically just be in hiatus until the voters take on the bills through ballot initiatives in 2024. And the two bills that I'm talking about, one is one that SEIU was a major sponsor of, AB 257, which is the Fast Food Accountability and Standards Act, also known as the Fast Food Worker Organizing Bill. The other bill I'm referring to is SB 1137, which is a bill that would have banned oil drilling in close proximity to schools and places where people live. One of those things where you're like, well, how is that even allowed? Why should there be an oil drill next to a school? There's something wrong with that. And the truth is it's been allowed, and it has been one of the major contaminants of folks' environment and has caused all sorts of negative health repercussions. We both know that it took many years to pass that bill, many years to pass the fast food worker bill, simply because the opposition was so vehement from corporate America, folks that have the deepest pockets out there, basically. So it's really timely that we're talking, because these two mega bills that workers, communities pushed, night and day for years and finally passed and earned the governor's signature are now not happening, right? And essentially through this referendum process that many people would argue has really just been manipulated and turned into a tool to fight laws that big pocketed folks don't like. If you would, Tia, tell us a bit about the fast food worker bill and the role that SEIU played and where you're at right now with this court decision.
You hit it on the nail, Christina, right? Our referendum process is pretty rigged in the favor of corporations, right? I want us to take a step back and just think about this as we have worked our tails off to elect an electorate that looks more like the communities that we serve, an electorate that has more women, that has more people of color, Latinos, African Americans, API. The more that we change that electorate, taking on that power, right, the more likely it is that these corporations have tried to find another alternative to exercise their power and to stall and halt our progress in California. And so what we've seen is exactly what you said, the referendum process and the whole initiative process as a whole really being the stomping ground where corporations believe is their only path left because of our great work with the electorate to stop our progress and halt our progress. And they've done this multiple times. You mentioned two of the most recent times, right? Which is currently AB 257, which I would call it probably the most advanced bill and the most transformative bill and breakthrough bill that we've seen in the labor movement of some time. It gives fast food workers the power to sit at the table and negotiate or have standards in their industry. And to think that something so basic would be so widely opposed to the tune of millions of dollars by the industry to stop it, it is a direct attempt to halt the progress and halt the voice and mute the voice of people in our communities. That is their goal. That is their intention. But it was a huge win, right? Workers who have for 15 years plus fought tirelessly. I had women that were sitting on the steps of the Capitol every single day, working every single door to get AB 257 passed in a fair, honest way, telling legislators their story, telling the governor their story, why it's so important. Make no mistake, these people that are fighting on the fast food side, these amazing, amazing women and men, they're people of color. They're mainly women, but 60% Latinos. And yet when they have that victory, corporations stop at nothing, even lying to voters and telling folks who are signing the signature form that this was actually a referendum to increase wages for workers, when in fact we know it was one to halt the progress of workers. Like you said, the oil drilling one, again, another referendum that was put on the ballot, multi-billion-dollar corporations trying to override years of progress for the environmental community and allies, and that has qualified on the ballot as well.
So one of the things you said is how much money these folks have spent. I read that on the oil drilling side, it was like 20 or $30 million to do the signature collection, filing the court challenge to halt the bill. I think it's really notable, and we should just take a step back and think about this big picture, right? So if the corporations are willing to spend that much money to stop something, imagine what their fear is of what they're going to be losing. If they're willing to make that type of investment, what are the dollars that we're really talking about here, right? That is the profit that these folks make off of the labor of everybody that you're talking about. Yeah, and same on the oil drilling side. And of course, there's your typical business fueled, messaging, right? Every local restaurant is going to just go out of business and your Whopper is going to cost $10. Everything always becomes, well, if you do this to us, we're just going to pass it on to the consumer and everybody's going to suffer. And for the most part, that's just eaten up, right? That messaging is just like, oh, well, yeah, of course, that's a problem, right? Versus, well, maybe people shouldn't be exploited and have wage theft and have discrimination and be treated so poorly in this industry. Why do we trade off against each other? Why does the consumer have to be pitted against the low wage worker?
Yep. I mean, look, these corporations are raking in $30-40 billion a year. And I think the workers are asking simply, right? Can I make enough to just be able to put food on the table?
There you go.
I mean, the one thing that we have to think about is our unemployment rate. We got good numbers, right? Unemployment rate is pretty low, but yet all of us know every single day when we're in our communities, the struggle that our people are experiencing. Why are people working every day and still yet not able to put food on the table or worse, a roof over their head? When the companies that they're working for, from the oil industry to a McDonald's or a fast food industry, they're not struggling. They're raking in billions and billions of dollars. So this idea that the policies that we're putting forward to better value the workers that are the production entity of their multi-billion dollars. The idea that giving them an increase or giving them a say-so is going to increase cost to a business. No, that's a choice. And the choice
Yeah.
is, do you need 30, $40 billion of profit? Or maybe can you
Right.
take $20 billion of profit
Right.
instead and maybe
Right.
trickle
Right.
rest to workers who deserve some recognition for their productivity in their work, right? It's just
Right.
unacceptable.
Right. Well, without whom you wouldn't have anything.
Right,
Really, at the end of the
exactly,
day.
exactly. I think I read yesterday, maybe it was a SACB, the fossil fuel industry spent $36 million on lobbying last year.
Oh,
$36 million on
I saw that.
on
I saw
on
that.
lobbying against keeping our communities safe and healthy for our
Yes.
folks. They spent $36 million. The fast food industry, maybe not that much, in the lobbying efforts, but it was well in the millions of dollars to stop
Yeah.
257. That's next to what they're spending for the referendum. That's
Yeah.
that's not even inclusive of that. They're spending another
There you
20 to
go.
30, 40, 50 million pulling the
Yeah.
policy back. So these folks will stop at nothing to maintain their power. And
That's it.
unfortunately, Christina, power that dollar for dollar, we can't match. We have to have other tactics in how to match that power.
That's right. So that is a fantastic segue because the overall stereotype that, well, the public sector unions, they're just as powerful as the realtors. They're just as powerful as the chamber. It as though we are these profit-making multi-billion-dollar entities as well. And what a great way to paint it, right? Because then it like completely obscures what the nature of our power is, which is people, because of what exactly you said, which is we will never be able to compete dollar for dollar. Why do we, as labor, field so many attacks, field so many efforts to destroy us, right? The Janus decision, Harris versus Quinn, all of the nefarious things that came out of the Trump organization. There's a reason why that is happening. We are the only thing that stands between that hegemony of corporate America controlling ultimately the decision-making process, democracy.
If there's anything we can do to combat the power of corporate money and resources, it's the people. And there's no better way to organize people than bringing workers into a union. The essence of unionization is giving a worker the ability to level the playing field with their big boss. So if you take that into a broader context, right? How do we level the playing field with these corporate bulldogs that we just talked about? With the hundreds of
Right.
millions of dollars they have, how do we level that playing field? And fortunately, we do have unions who have gathered workers and who have organized workers. We stand on their shoulders. The workers are the
Right.
voice. It's a democratic process where workers have the
Right.
power. And there's no
Right.
better way. There hasn't been a historical way to combat the power of corporations without having union density and union strength. Our power
Yeah.
is centered on organizing. Our power is centered
Right.
on people and numbers. And look at who we are. SEIU, 7 in 10 of our members are people of color, right? 6 in 10 of
Right.
our members are women. We are a
Right.
place where workers, for the first time in their lives, often get to go to the legislature or go to their local
That's
elected
right.
offices and assert their power and make demands and require recognition and representation that is in their interest. Right now, we're in a place where 71% of workers say they support unions. It's one of the best places we've been in some time in our history. However, only
That's right.
10% nationwide have the chance to belong to one, right? So even our structures and our systems at the national level are geared to prevent us from being able to grow that movement because that movement,
That's
people
right.
know, is going to be a challenge to corporate power. There's an interest and there's a desire, especially from young voters, to form unions,
Mhm.
be part of unions. So I'm excited about that, but we have to remove the
Yeah.
barriers, which the fast food bill attempted to do, remove the barriers that block us from forming those unions.
I mean, this notion like, well, if workers want to join a union, they could just join a
Tough.
union when, research shows the efforts and the money that the employer puts into keeping that from
Right.
happening.
And it's been going on for many centuries. And it's our job and our task, and hopefully along with our progressive allies, to beat those rules back, similar to the systemic racist structures that we see all too well in our criminal justice system, in our court systems. They did not skip the system of unionization. Those systemic
right.
racial structures that stop us from being able to get people power and be represented
Yep.
very alive and well. And we need the
That's
power of the electorate to beat them back. and the power of the people to hold them accountable.
When I used to speak at the membership meetings at UDW, I would start with, when you walk down the halls of the Capitol, you see lobbyists of every stripe. And over time, you realize, wow, there's an organization, there's an association for everything, right? The Christmas tree producers have an organization, right? The plastic bottle people have their organization. Even the powerful folks organize themselves collectively to protect their interests.
Yep.
The concept of being organized and the group being more powerful than the whole is not one that's, only something we have thought of. That is the way society organizes itself. That's the way money organizes itself. That's the way, again, employers organize themselves. So this notion that workers are just supposed to be like their own negotiating entity, right? Taking on this completely unequal power balance, and that unions are somehow bad when it really is the same concept of collective action. It just blows me away. And so I always like to start with, why do we have a union? Well, because everyone else is organized too.
Right. Yes. I mean, if you think about a way to beat back the corporate power that we're talking about, it has to happen with collective power of the people. One of the biggest lessons I think we drew from the successes and even some of our failures is that we are way more powerful together. It's the power of the people. And so the movements that you've seen as we celebrate Black History Month, of Martin Luther King marching with AFSCME and holding the I Am Man sign up for sanitation workers, thinking about the collective power of that progressive civil rights movement and the power that we needed to advocate for workers to have some decency and respect in their workplace. The idea of those happening in separate fights and separate battles, it's the same battle. We're taking on the same people. And so our shared power and our shared advocacy and power of the people, it's all that we got. And yes, I would say that the corporations and other entities are copying us. When they see us coming together and they see our shared interests coming and marching and fighting and creating power in the electorate, they've realized and are scared of that collective strength and power and will do anything to stop it because they know it's impactful if we do it successfully.
That's right. So taking a step back for folks who are listening, one of the areas that we don't do a good job with as labor, quote labor, right, this monolith of labor, is helping people even understand how we're organized. Organizations that I've worked with don't know who to talk to or who represents who, how are they relating to each other. And I feel like we are somewhat our own sort of world, and we need to break that down and we need to stop that. So let's just start from, how is SEIU organized?
Well, how much time do we have here? I'm just playing. So look, the mission of making sure that workers have the ability to come to the table and advocate for their needs is one that does have smaller parts. You need that, right? And so the way that SEIU is structured is I'm at the state council. I am an organization that represents the interest of 17 different locals across the state. We have 17 different locals that represent a myriad of different classifications of workers. And they're all geographically based across the state, from LA to the Central Valley, to the Bay Area, to the North. We have locals that represent several industries. And a collective power comes using those 17 locals to fight and advocate for each other's interests. And it's fascinating, right? It's pretty amazing when you see, our home care local and our nurse local come down and fight for our janitors to have a better path forward. Or when you have our janitors and our state workers and our county workers come and say, fast food workers need a voice. That's the collective power that I believe corporations are scared of. I believe that's what makes corporations understand that the battle that they have to stop our progress is going to be one that they're going to have to attach hundreds of millions of dollars to. And then you have the Labor Federation. The Labor Federation is an umbrella organization that has all affiliated unions from, AFSCME and the building trades and SEIU and all of our different powerful unions that come together for that to be a place of even broader collective power and strength. There's a lot, and I know it's hard to track and follow, but it's a way to make sure that the workers that are represented in that specific area or industry have a voice and have camaraderie with folks who work in the same industry as them. They can share their stories, lock arms and push for changes to happen in their industry, but also changes to happen in industries that are not even theirs. And it is a powerful, amazing thing to see when they come together and be corporate power back.
And I would add too, it's organized in a way for actual democracy to happen too, right? The workers vote, the workers decide who leads them. The way I like to think of it is the locals, or we call them affiliates. They are, as you said, usually segmented around either an occupation or an industry or even a region, because you have locals that represent different workers too. It's very specific to how that union works, but the parent union is usually the one that you see in Sacramento. Well, not all the time, because definitely there's affiliates up here too. So imagine the umbrella is the parent, and then the umbrella over the umbrella is the Labor Federation. And the umbrella over the umbrella of that at the national level. And then locally, you have central labor councils, those locals that are in that region where they organize to work on things, shared interests like elections, campaigns, supporting each other in collective bargaining, et cetera. And there are central labor councils or CLCs throughout California. And one of the things I tell people who ask is, do you know where your CLC is? There's all sorts of manners in which this stuff is organized. One of the first ways to start is to find out who those folks are.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing about SEIU that's unique, right, is that we are deeply involved in the community, right? We participate in a number of coalitions. We have a Dream Alliance coalition here in Sacramento, a group of progressive allies. We come together with the shared agenda and legislative agenda. We work together at the local level as well as the state level. And so there's ways to partner and bring our power together. The thing about us and why I've stayed here for so long and hope to stay here a lot longer is that our organization is literally driven by our members. They tell their stories to us every single year as we start to plan our agenda and what matters to them. And naturally, what matters is their wages, and they're going to say their working conditions, or they have a contract that's up. Of course, those are things that come up. But we've had mothers and grandmothers talk about the need to fix the bail system and the frustration they have with their sons or their daughters getting mistreated by the system just by driving their cars and being out in their community. So we listen to our members, and oftentimes their frustration isn't just about their work conditions. Their frustration is about the community at large. And so it directs us to partner with community groups like your listeners, I'm sure, to make sure that we're partnering together to make pivotal change in California for the myriad of issues that our members deal with. I mean, we hear about housing more than anything from our members and homelessness and the threats of homelessness. Their stories are what guide our agenda. And oftentimes those stories are not just specific to their workplace. They're specific about their lives and their communities.
I would say for a union to be as impactful as it can and to be as strong as it can, it has to build those alliances, those intersectional alliances.
I can't say it enough. Our power and our ability to beat them is not to match their dollars. We have something that they don't have. We have boots on the ground. We have people power. We have voices. We have stories. We have action in the streets and online. The only way that's effective to beat that back, though, is if we all come together.
You're 100% right. Well, I always want to ground the podcast in advice and insight for the listener. And for folks listening who may be knowledgeable about the labor world or maybe totally brand new to it, or folks who may be traditionally anti-labor, are there anything you would throw out there, some insight, some advice for folks listening?
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for the opportunity again. Look, I think, it starts with being connected to the fight, right? And making sure that and labor has to do a better job at this, that we're communicating that fight and making sure that we're responsive to the concerns that folks have in communities and advocacy that they're pushing for, and make sure that we use that collective power. I will say that there is going to be something that we're going to hone in on this year on referendum reform. Don't have a lot of the details yet, but to the extent that we can collectively join together and take on the system that has been rigged and that corporations are using to find loopholes in our democracy, that we can tighten that up a little bit and at least ensure that as we advocate and win, that corporations aren't able to take that win back with money and power and loopholes and deceiving our democratic process. And we would love the camaraderie and the collective power around that. And other than that, I think you hit it on the nail, Christina, is how do we connect our community to the work of labor unions and vice versa. We'll do a better job at that, reaching out to local SEIUs, direct connection, and we'll do a better job at reaching out as well and making sure that we're able to join forces in a united fight.
Thank you so much, Tia, for taking the time to speak with me today. This has been a great conversation.
Likewise, I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Tia.